Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.
Welcome to another episode of the ARC Advisory Group Smart Cities podcast. My name's Eddie Fidler. I'm a transport analyst at ARC, and I'm happy to be joined today by Rich Mohr. He's the VP of Fleet Solutions at ChargePoint. Hey, Rich.
Hey, Eddie. Thanks for inviting me on the call today.
Yeah, thanks for joining. It's going to be great. Maybe you could just start by introducing yourself to the listeners.
Sure. My name's Rich Mohr. I'm the VP of Fleet for ChargePoint. I've been with the company for a couple months now. I've been in the transport industry for my entire career. I've spent the past 25 years at Ryder Truck Rental based out of Miami. I was the VP and Global Product Manager for the rental product, and then I ended my career as the Chief Technology Officer for the company, leading Ryder's sustainability, EV, alternative fuel, connected fleet, and diagnostics products for the company. So long history on trucks and transportation and fleet management. So
that's perfect. All right. So this is obviously geared to the EV fleet space. So maybe you could just sort of set the stage and lay out how you see the space at the moment, and where we're at.
Yeah, I think when you look at the fleet space in North America and Europe right now, you're really at kind of a tipping point where fleet is starting to mature from an automotive product primarily to a commercial product. And what I mean by that is you're starting to see the adoption rates on the automotive side get to a level where they're meaningful now, so that you're seeing them in consumer and business applications like sales and service, and not only for transporting your kids around or driving to work in the morning. The cars have taken on a life of their own in the fleet space. And I think what that's done is it's laid a lot of good foundational groundwork for commercialization of electric equipment. So when you look at it in the heavier duty classes, even in the light van or light truck and the medium truck, you see that the automotive segment has really started to lay the groundwork for what does fleet mean. Not only in North America, but in Europe. So that I think we're starting to see that tipping point now, where fleet starts to blend together of a mix of class 1, all the way up into class 8 eventually. And it's going to be over the course of many years. You're going to start to see different types of vehicles phase into the marketplaces in Europe and North America. So it's really, I think foundationally, it was really interesting to watch, because obviously fleet's been around for longer than I've been working, and probably longer than I've been alive, but I've never got to see it kind of start from its infancy of where it is now to where it's going to be. And that's really why it was so exciting to come over to ChargePoint and really focus on fleet solutions for the company. The things that are important to the industry are, obviously fleet management, driver management, and helping companies hit their cost goals and their sustainability goals. And there's a lot of work that goes into that to help fleets achieve that.
Okay, great. And maybe we can talk about some of the really exciting kind of emerging pieces to this. So, before the call, we were talking about how exciting school bus is, especially not just because the use case is perfect, but because of the potential funding we're getting from the administration and things like that, and smart highway. So
yeah, it's really exciting when there's some use cases that just are extremely exciting as outliers, and school bus is certainly one of those. You look at a fleet across North America that typically sits idle a lot. But it's critical, and it's got to operate over a long life period, typically 15, 20 years, those vehicles have to operate. And when you look at having the lowest cost possible and maintaining those buses and keeping municipalities and school systems cost structure, level over a period of time, electrification just kind of starts to check all the boxes of, predictability, cost effectiveness, long life cycle, sustainability. It starts to check all those boxes, and then you add in incentives for cities and municipalities to move to electrification. It gets even better. So when you start to look at, access to charging and infrastructure not being that burdensome on school buses, because typically it's AC power or it's lower level DC power, because the goal around buses is charge as low and as slow as possible, which is the most efficient way to charge vehicles. It really adds in a lot of excitement around that product. And I think it's one that is easy for people to wrap their arms around, that, not only do you want your kids traveling on an electric bus, right, because it's good for everyone, but it's also good for, as a financial reason, for your school system, for your city, for your state, because of the predictability of the cost of that over a long period of time. So it's really exciting to see. The other piece around smart highways is I've started having conversation, and it's come up multiple times now across different agencies that I've worked with, nonprofits mostly, and then some of the bigger funding organizations. They're talking about, what type of investments do we want to help make in smart cities? And the way they look at it is not only, in the future, whenever, when there's autonomous and you need all this, infrastructure and all the rest of the stuff. But I think of it from a very simple point of view is helping cities understand, if they want to electrify and they want to have clean vehicles running in their cities to make deliveries, they really need to understand, where do you stand up the charging infrastructure outside of your city to allow people to access it? And whether that's transports, or it's last mile distributors, or it's over the road, or it's your own government agencies that are servicing your clients. So I'm starting to see a lot of great work on organizations helping cities map, their city and what makes the most sense on their roads to stand up electrification, whether it's slightly outside the city limits or it's right inside the city limits. And it's great to see these organizations start to take that time and really map out that property. Where's it going to sit? What's the access to the utilities? Do they incorporate in, solar with battery backup and some utilities to have ample charging available? And I think I'm seeing it over and over and over again, those conversations occurring. And it's really interesting to see that charging is being thought of as an access point into making deliveries or servicing your customer base inside the city. And then that bleeds right into, well, what is our electrification strategy for our own vehicles that are powering our city? So our municipal buses, or our service vehicles that we're using to do, whatever, a typical government agency needs to do inside their own municipality. And it trickles down. So they're just unbelievable conversations that are starting to occur at lots of different levels, at the state and the federal and the local municipal level.
Yeah, so some of that infrastructure can definitely be shared.
Yes.
Between public and your delivery fleets and the private sector, and some won't, of course. But yeah, it's a big question. How do you do that intelligently, not waste resources? And it's been a point of issue because, generally governments acting top down aren't always best equipped to decide that these, we need 700 points, exactly there, and there. But this is the kind of area that obviously requires public driven investment. So it's like, how do you do that efficiently? And there's an interesting anecdote out of Amsterdam. I know that they were at least doing this recently, where instead of dictating where the city would install chargers, they had a system where a resident could ask for charging. So if they live on X street, and they could say, I want to buy an EV, but there's no charging here. And if a few people in that area want charging, they'll install charging right there. So that's kind of the opposite, like a bottom up.
Yeah, that crowdsourcing of charging options.
Yeah. like an emergent kind of approach to it. So no, it's a tough thing, but it's really cool to know that the conversations are being had and at least some people are being very proactive about it.
Yeah. And the cities you wouldn't expect that would want to adopt so early, you're starting to see those conversations occur more frequently, and it's for different reasons. I think some of the cities are looking at it straight as a financial decision on, what is this going to cost us, and over the long run, are we making a better investment? And some of them are taking, a sustainability approach on we need to do this because our people that live in our community are asking us to do this, and they live here and they pay the taxes. So there's lots of different reasons why cities are starting to move this way, and it's great to see that there's so many different thought processes that there is going through their head on why do this, and I think everyone's looking at different types of solutions to solve problems that are all very similar. So it's access, visibility, and control. It's always comes down to those three for electrification. It's, who can access and why. Do we have control over the charging and the infrastructure, and the power? And then visibility of do I see what's going on within the network that we've created, whether it's behind the fence, in front of the fence, it's public facing, or it's private facing. So that kind of visibility, access, and control, they're all trying to answer those same things. It's really interesting to watch the conversations because it always comes back to those 3 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where this EV business ties into the regular business of running a fleet or running a city.
Right.
Where it used to be, more in its infancy, EV just wouldn't really make economic sense, but some people were signaling something, or it was just a pilot, or it was sort of a toy application. And now we're in this fascinating point of development where they're not ubiquitous. It's not like every single application is fully EV or can be fully EV tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But there's a patchwork where some verticals are perfect for it, and the vehicles, the solutions out there are totally up to the challenge. And now it's a matter of doing it and having it be practical and even better than the diesel options or than the gasoline options.
Yeah.
So it's moving from just ESG, ticking a box, to this is actually the way to go for some verticals. And like, how do we do this viably? And
right.
Which is fascinating because in 20 years, it'll just be like, the air you breathe, right? You're not going to think about it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I absolutely agree with you. You're going to, that transition is going to happen over the next 20 years, but it went from being a novelty, deployment of, hey, we've checked the box and we bought a couple of vehicles, to now the conversation is, hey, over 15 or 20 years, this really makes a lot of sense for all the reasons: financial, sustainability, our customer satisfaction, which is the people that they serve in their community. They start checking all three of those boxes now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's when it really accelerates too.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned, those 3 points of access and visibility and the other one that's I'm blanking on. Obviously that's always a concern for fleets, but in some ways, electrification actually improves fleet operations. Could you maybe talk about that and how you're seeing that, how that's possible?
Yeah. So what we're seeing in the early days is how it improves fleet operation is because, you get a lot more say on one, you get a lot more visibility on the vehicles, right? Because you see what they're like when they come back. You see what the state of health of the vehicle is, state of charge of the vehicle is, and then you're only charging the vehicles to what they really need to function in that route or those routes that vehicle functions in. So what we're seeing early is, slow and low is the way to go when you're charging fleets, but opportunity charging is king when you need to prioritize vehicles when they come back from a service and they're lower than you expected, or they're used harder than they're expected, or you have a vehicle that performs routine jobs on that yard, like a yard tractor. The charging needs to be smart enough to say, okay, those vehicles that are charging low and slow because we know we're going to get to the goal, it doesn't matter. Make that opportunity available for that vehicle that comes into that string to charge at the maximum rate available, so that vehicle can be prioritized and put back into your yard. So it builds that confidence around when the driver has to go on break or parks the vehicle for an amount of time to go do something, an activity. That vehicle, when it goes on the charger, the software needs to be smart enough to say, yes, that we're going to prioritize that vehicle now, and we're going to divert the power from the vehicles that are charging slowly to charge that vehicle as fast as possible so it's ready to go back into service on that yard. And there's tons of applications for that, but that really smart charging software, what makes fleet operation possible. So those are the things that, you know, fleet managers want to be able to see. And that checks, that's that visibility, what's going on in my fleet, access, can I see it? Can I set it? Can I set what limits I want? And then control is when something comes into that string, do I have the ability to override and treat that vehicle differently? So that's some of the stuff that is getting really important for transport managers when you're running mixed fleets and large fleets behind the fence.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of that, you know, having that intimate data and being kind of really up close and in your visibility of your fleet. I mean, a lot of that could have been done and was done to some extent in legacy fleets. It doesn't have to have an electric drivetrain to do that, but it seems to be that the movement to electric, it's just in sync, and it always goes along with this general like 21st century approach with that data,
right?
And with that tighter knowledge and control. They just kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and you see it, and it's crazy. You see it on the automotive side. You know, initially, right, when people are charging vehicles at home, you know, 90% of people that buy an electric vehicle, they're going to charge the vehicle at home because they can.
Yeah.
But they want some confidence of having charging in the wild. But that's really just managing your energy, right? Between, you know, how much power do you have in your vehicle at home versus when do you know you're going to need to charge in the wild. And, you know, all those interfaces have been built into the electric vehicles on the automotive side. They're telling you how much range do you have, when's the next charging station available. That's what happens behind the fence too, except typically those vehicles don't charge in the wild unless they're a lower power or smaller vehicles, you know, on the van or the pickup truck or the car side. So it's really interesting to kind of watch the migration between that automotive and that light medium truck space. There's some of the same behaviors you're seeing transition into the heavier vehicles.
Mm-hmm. And
there's some trucks that'll live their whole life charging behind a fleet at one parking lot, and there's some electric vehicles that'll move around from site to site to site as companies' business models change. So I think you'll find as vehicle technology gets better, and obviously that's going to come with better performance and range on commercial vehicles, you're going to start to see fleets move vehicles around from site to site around the country to best shape their fleet so their drivers can perform the best.
Sure. Yeah. And you can't help but sense that this whole shift to electric, it just brought a lot of the tech and Silicon Valley approach and know-how and design to the automotive and fleet space.
Yeah.
And of course, you guys are California based. You know, Tesla's California based. A lot of the companies are. It's really helped revitalize some of these approaches that you could have actually done with a diesel engine, but it just goes hand in hand with what's going on now. So it's really cool. A lot of synergy there, right?
Yeah.
Throw in some buzzwords.
I think and you look at energy management, you know, the way we look at energy management, we don't want to control the price of energy. That has nothing to do with us. When we talk about energy management, we want to be able to give the best control to that fleet operator to charge those vehicles the most effective way possible, given the energy they have available at their site, and do that optimally. So those are some of the things that you really get a lot of benefit out of efficiently utilizing that electricity that's available on that site, whether it's, you know, high power or low power.
Definitely. So okay, that's the space broadly at the moment, and what's really exciting about it. And so yeah, last fall we had your colleague Bill Lowenthal, who's VP of Product. He came on and that was our first podcast with ChargePoint. So he gave us a great overview of what you guys are up to and kind of what your philosophy is and some of the longer term goals and how you're fitting in with the entire, CASE or ACES transition, which is really exciting. But since you're the fleet expert, obviously the point of this is all about fleets. So maybe you could talk to us more about your current work in fleet, and maybe you could walk us through like an illustrative deployment or two, and you can keep them anonymized. You don't have to tell us the company or the city. But yeah, people just love to hear, and I love to hear kind of the nitty gritty and the day to day on the ground stuff.
Yeah. So it's, fleet, when you're looking at it from a deployment standpoint, we start in a couple different places. So let me go through a couple of the use cases on the customer side. So we try and educate different buyers of electric vehicles. So we're trying to educate the dealers who are selling the vehicles through their dealership. So we're trying to empower them on, what do they need to be able to maintain those vehicles, uptime, diagnostic, demo rides, just like they would with a normal retail fleet. So we're giving them access on, ChargePoint hardware and ChargePoint software, so they can do those things at their dealership effectively. So whether it's a small local dealer that's selling multiple brands of trucks, or it's a large dealer, which is, a part of an OEM, we're helping those dealerships do that so they feel comfortable with financing of that against the vehicle. They feel comfortable with recommending charger types with those types of vehicles based on deployment. And then they have ChargePoint as a backstop to help them with engineering solution. What does site planning look like? What are additional financing options for larger purchases, grant management, in those processes. So that's what we do at the dealer side. And then with the customer side, customers that are buying vehicles, we're doing a very similar thing. We're looking at, how are you going to operate those vehicles in your site? So if they're AC vehicles, are you going to do a combination of at home and depot? So do we need to help you set up your employees around home charging? And we can coordinate that through our O&M partners around installing home chargers that are on their Wi-Fi. So we see electric usage, and we can do reimbursement with employees that are using their own electricity at home. Do we help the customer with their depot solution? So they have access points, at the employee's home, and then they have depot access point when they're loading or they're checking in or they're parked there for the day. So that's on the AC side, and kind of all the things in between that, right? So it's employee reimbursement, it's integration with telematics, it's fleet depot tool of seeing what chargers are available, what the use rate is. It's charger management if that company wants to make those chargers free, or do they want to charge for them? Typically in most companies, if it's a depot type situation behind the fence with no other access, those chargers are obviously free because they're paying for the electricity. But if a company has that depot open to the public, they're probably going to make them free during the day when their employees are there, and then they're going to want to charge for them at night at a nominal rate. So, you or I could pull into that yard, and you can picture a typical utility or a plumbing company that has a parking lot in the front that has a bunch of AC chargers. Why wouldn't you make those available if all your employees are gone? So those are the things that we really help them through on the AC side, on the fleet depot side, when it's kind of home to depot. On DC higher power, obviously you're depot charging or you're behind the fence charging. You're not charging a ton in the wild because the vehicles don't fit in parking spots in the wild. They will in the future, because you'll see more depot charging stations that are commercial in nature, longer spots, wider spots. They're in business parks where people generally pick up and drop off freight and stuff like that. But on the DC side, what we really work on the customer is, what are you helping them understand? What are they planning for long term, right? So the goal around ChargePoint is not to ever have to rip out equipment because it wasn't enough for that site. We'd rather expand that infrastructure with that customer and allow that customer to be able to add more charging as they grow. So we take a modular approach to charging with our depot customers, even on the DC side. So we might put in extra infrastructure in the ground and cap it. And we know that we can start to pair some of our product in the future when they go from 1 truck to 3 to 5 to 7. And then we have products that are able to be redeployed on top of that existing infrastructure, so they can have higher power distributed over more vehicles. So we can, we have products that will allow them to charge 16 vehicles over one charging solution. So those are the type of conversations we're having with them around, do you want people to have access to this? Yes or no? And if you do, we'll teach you how to get control of that so you can set it appropriately. If not, and you're uniquely behind the fence, we're going to help you accomplish your goals now on what you're going to do from a charging and infrastructure standpoint, but we're also going to help you think about what you might need in the future. So we're not doing it twice. And then also we work with all the OEMs on vehicle inoperability. So all the commercial vehicles will go and do inoperability testing on those vehicles. So when they are deployed at our charging locations or any ChargePoint charging location, we've already tested that vehicle on that charger and understand whether that vehicle is going to function properly. So those are the things that we have to do for customers on the fleet side, whether it's take home, depot, or behind the fence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like a big part of the role is actually guidance and some education and answering some questions.
Yeah. There's a lot of planning around site planning, and and really it's a conversation around what are you trying to accomplish here, short term and long term, and knowing that you don't have to spend a lot of money now on building up massive amounts of infrastructure, because with us you're able to expand out that infrastructure, but we'll help guide you the right way to begin, so we can do that cost effectively in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because folks who've been operating in fleet, with diesel for decades, the entire concept of charging and having to have a real relationship with your utility and time of use pricing and demand tariffs and energy management software. I mean, we're not a software company. Like we're delivering freight. So that's obviously a huge part of your role if you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
That's really cool to see. And the rest of it is, nowhere in there did I hear selling charge boxes or selling power. It's just, that's not it at all.
Nope.
Not it at all. It's enabling them to do what they need to do. We're
primarily a software company.
Exactly.
We just happen to have really good hardware that goes along with it.
Right. And the hardware is more or less a commodity, but to your point, you can have higher quality and lower quality, but that's not the point of all this. The point is to allow them to set up charging infrastructure for employees or for their vehicles, and then be able to seamlessly open that to the public at night and have all the billing and access control and everything else taken care of in the cloud, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the magic.
Yep.
Awesome. Could you give us maybe one particular example of a fleet, and you can anonymize, of course, that came to you, like what was their goal, what was holding them back, and kind of how that went?
Yeah, we had a fleet out in Arizona that they're a really big distributor, one of the biggest distributors in the US, and they really wanted to start deploying electric vehicles for their last mile deliveries. So they have when certain retailers start running low on product, it's so important for them to have product on that shelf. They'll make hotshot deliveries from their warehouse to that retailer. And they're really quick deliveries, but they're all day long that they're hitting different retailers from their warehouse. And it's probably less than 10, 12 boxes. So it would never justify using a truck. So it was really more of a large van, a step up van that you could stand up in, with a small box on it. And they really wanted to electrify because they're like, this is the perfect situation, right? It's always back at our warehouse. It never goes away for overnight. It's a perfect application for us to learn how to do this. And they came to us and said, we think we know what vehicle we want, but we don't know, what we should do on a charger at this location. And they were thinking about just getting a standard non-network charger and just letting it rip and seeing how it goes. And when we finally walked them through the options that we had around what's the difference between networked and non-networked, and having the software to see what's going on with that charger versus not, they said by far the decision completely outweighed going with a non-network decision, because a non-network charger, because of a couple things. One, that warehouse is extremely busy and there's hundreds of people working in it, but they never know if that vehicle gets plugged back in when it comes back from making its run. So it gets stuck at the dock getting loaded again, but that driver is not ready to go out. Or when the vehicle comes back, it's sitting just away from the dock and it's not ready to be loaded, and no one's thinking, I need to put it on the charger. So those notifications they needed on that vehicle telling them, hey, the vehicle's back in your yard because we geofenced the location, but it's not on the charger. They absolutely need those notifications because they're relying on that vehicle. They've told all their customers they're going to make their hotshot deliveries with electric vehicles, because they really wanted their customers to understand that they were making an attempt to electrify early. The other piece is the chargers that they had, they wanted to have access to them so they could see the usage on those chargers on really in their own financial model internally. Big companies have a thirst for data, especially around transportation, because it's a couple penny business, right, around running a fleet.
Mm-hmm.
So they really wanted the data off that charger to see what their kW usage was over the number of routes that they had, so they could start to calculate what their total cost of ownership was going to be on that electric vehicle plus power. And they couldn't do that with a non-network charger. And then access, they did eventually, they had some customers that were picking up their own hotshot loads to go back to their store, and they're asking if they can use their charger when they're on site. So it was those three things. I'm like, guys, this is a perfect use case for you to have a network charger and something with an enterprise software over it. And it really turned out to be a great use case. And that was a single truck, which turned into 3 and turned into 5 over multiple locations. And they're all doing a very similar action. So it was really great to see that company come to their own conclusion on how they thought about their fleet electrification. And we just had to show them what type of features we had available from a hardware and software standpoint, what we do to support fleets. And then they kind of came to their own conclusion around, there's really no other way to go besides this way.
Yeah, and you got to think they start with one vehicle, but they have that detailed operational data around it, and analyzing that can help inform them for the scale up. Like, does this actually make sense? Would this location maybe not make sense because of this dynamic we're seeing at the pilot location or the first deployment? So that sounds like a gold mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then I'm curious, given that a lot of these sort of golden use cases exist, these like win-win-win situations and mission profiles for fleets, not all, but there's enough, and they represent enough vehicles, even just in the US, that it's really significant. What's stopping some of these guys from electrifying? Like, what challenges? Like, what are you encountering with these fleets?
So mainly, it's really around vehicle availability right now in North America. So still, I mean, you take all the OEMs, traditional OEMs, and the born electric OEMs. There's still not a heck of a lot of production, over 9,000 pounds in North America. So automotive, the numbers keep on increasing, but on the truck side, it's still very limited. And even with the conversion vehicles that are available in the U.S., like the Lightnings or the Exos or the C Electric that are converting traditional OEMs to electric vehicles, there's only so much capacity that they have to produce. So the 30 or 40, or I don't even know what the volume is now that they're producing on a quarterly basis, it's still very limited, and it's only getting a couple vehicles in the company's hands across the U.S. and Canada. So I think until you can see the production capability and capacity increase, those kind of golden use cases end up staying as the golden use cases until you get more of a model where you can produce and sell more vehicles in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. So you're sensing that demand is outweighing supply.
By far.
So
Yeah, I mean, you look at the pre-orders, right? That you look at the pre-orders that GM and Ford have put out publicly on their electric equipment. I mean, that they've gotten massive pre-orders, and these are from big companies that are really placing these orders. That these are big Fortune 500 companies that are interested in this product and willing to place pre-orders on these vehicles. Certainly, the demand is there.
hmm
You look at Tesla and the pre-orders on the tractor, right?
Yeah.
They don't announce everyone, but the ones that I read, these are big Fortune 500 companies that are placing orders on this equipment, and they're not placing an order for one. They're placing an order for hundreds.
hmm Yeah. No, that's really exciting because that's a problem that is imminently solvable.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not intractable at all.
Yeah. No
For
doubt.
sure. For sure. But then I think there are also some hidden golden use cases where maybe folks in that space aren't really thinking about it. Like we had a conversation a little while ago about the opportunities in like police cruisers, right?
Yeah.
Where there's 400,000 cruisers and at least half of them are golden use case, but that's not really on people's radar. And yet, passenger vehicles, EVs exist.
Yeah.
That's not a supply problem. So there it's more of an education, and it doesn't even cross people's minds.
Yeah, it doesn't. And I think the other piece of that is I don't think everyone's aware yet that, and you use the police example, and I can't remember the city that you were telling me about. I think it was Indiana or someplace that.
Yeah, it was Bargersville. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Indiana. Yeah.
And I think that's a great use case. And I think if everyone understood what capabilities were available, that, hey, these officers can charge at home at night when they go home with their cruiser, and you can reimburse them for that electricity at home, and you're not paying them for that. You're not going to have to pay for fuel over the road. And we help you set up a depot at the police station where you have access to charging at the police station and you have access to charging at home. You've just quadrupled your footprint on that vehicle. And companies like ChargePoint can handle that kind of end-to-end experience for a municipality, whether it's, police or it's, public service. It's about that message on there are very easy ways to do this. And we integrate with, your current fuel card provider. So the cars you have left that are still running on gas, that billing is the same way that your electricity is. And the reporting is the same. So it works with your current accounting systems. And you're going to see how the cost comes into your model. And we'll handle the reimbursements for your employees and all those things. It's a matter of making it really easy for them to adopt that technology.
Yeah, I feel like, just the thought of all of that on the back end and the charging infrastructure, it just creates so much anxiety, and it's such an unknown thing for folks that you say, that's not for us. That's for a certain fleet, or that's for only California or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, which is it's just not the case.
Yeah, people don't only sit, I'm sure the police sit in cars in California as much as they sit in cars in New York and Indiana. So the opportunity to charge is the same no matter what state you're in.
Exactly. No, absolutely. So maybe you could tell us just some lessons and just things that you've learned from serving this space, even though it is relatively early.
Yeah, the things that I've learned is, make enough time to understand what your infrastructure looks like as it sits now, and ask questions around infrastructure around if I want to do this, what does it look like currently on my property, and what do I need to do to kind of get to our goals around, I want 5 vehicles or 10 vehicles or 20, or these are the routes and, all that stuff. But typically what we used to do, and I was guilty of this for 25 years, is I would make a truck first decision. Always. That's the business. So now we're taking a different approach of taking a charging first solution, which is, how do you access energy? That's the conversation you need to have first now, and say, this is what I have, this is how I want to access it, and this is what it's going to take to set it up. Because that's the longer part of the process now, is infrastructure, charging, software, setting up exactly how you want your business dialed in from energy management. And then you're making a vehicle decision, shortly thereafter. But I think that there's also this fear that anytime I want to electrify, I'm going to have to get the utility involved, and it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars in construction. And I'm just not finding that case to be true in these deployments that we're doing. And yes, the utility is a great partner when you have to bring additional energy to the curb or you have big infrastructure to do. But a lot of the deployments we do, we don't ever have to get the utility involved because there's plenty of power on that site for what that customer needs to accomplish. So there doesn't have to be a lot of fear around electrification. The other piece is around incentives and grants. On the commercial side of the U.S., there's a lot of I think pent up nervousness around why would I use incentives to electrify my fleet? There's got to be something wrong, or I'm going to get burned out by this somehow, or 3 or 5 years from now, I'm going to get a clawback because I didn't read the fine print, and all those things. There's a lot of fear around, you're making an investment in your business and you're making an investment in your community, and there's grants available, whether they come from the private sector, the public sector, or from the utility. They're there to help you electrify. And using someone like us to help you with that grant process will give you a peace of mind that you're doing it for the right reason and you're following the rules. And then we're going to help you with your project planning and your deployment. But there's still a lot of fear around, if I do this, what could happen if I utilize that money? And everyone needs to do a better job on communicating that. And it's tough, right? Because a lot of the states manage incentive programs at the state level. So I think we've done a really good job around consolidating all that data and helping customers understand each individual state what's available for them. Because I was at the TRALA meeting, the Truck Rental and Leasing Association meeting a couple weeks ago, and we were having conversations around grants, and I'm like, I was talking to the team that was there, and I said, listen, don't feel like you're doing something wrong by talking to your charging company about grant management or accepting money to offset the cost of infrastructure or working with an OEM to offset some of the cost of a vehicle. I'm like, you're not doing anything wrong. This money's available for that purpose. And certainly the cities and the states, they want you to deploy these vehicles and this infrastructure. So it's I think everyone gets a little nervous around that in the business community, because they're trying to run their business and they don't ever want to put themselves in a position where they did something wrong or they didn't think they were doing anything wrong, but it turns out years later it was wrong. And then they're getting hit with penalties and all the rest of the stuff. That's just not the case. And companies like us can really help with stuff like that, take that anxiety away.
Yeah, I get the sense that fleet managers, fleet professionals, and, especially in the private sector, like you said earlier, it's a low margin business. It's a tough business. They're not used to handouts, and they're not used to, any kind of flowery initiative or something ESG. They run a tough business, and they kind of run it right. And this whole world of politics and grant money,
they don't want anything to do with it. They're like, I just want to run my fleet.
Right, and they're not used to it, and it obviously produces some anxiety. And to your point, it doesn't help that it's just a patchwork of grants and programs from federal, state, and local, and philanthropic. Who has time to figure that out when you're running a 3% margin business?
Right.
So that's tough. But no, it really sounds like a lot of the issues it's vehicle availability, which is going away, and then education and awareness, which sounds trite, but it's literally the awareness of what's out there, what we actually can do with what's out there, how much it'll cost, and who can help us do it.
Right. That's exactly correct. Yeah, and I'm seeing the exact same thing. And to your point earlier, it'll definitely get better with time, and more vehicles in the market accelerates that learning. And I think we're making all the right steps in North America on how we're approaching this on the automotive and the transport side. I think that the market is maturing nicely. I think the buyers are becoming more sophisticated on understanding this, but it's going to take a lot more education and a lot more companies like us to help, basically get the back of customers that want to go on this journey early. And that's our job, is to make it comfortable for them through all of those facets, whether it's education, infrastructure, grant, or straight hardware. Those are the things that we need to help with. And that's our job, is to enable customers to be successful in this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a perfect summary. I was going to ask you to wrap up with just like a roadmap and kind of what we need to do to get there, but I think that was it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we got there naturally. Is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with? Any last thought that we didn't get to?
No, I think we're certainly in the beginning of this. There's a lot more exciting stuff to come. So in the future, maybe we'll talk about a, middle mile autonomous, or, what's going on in yard operations. There's some really neat technology that's coming out that I think is picking up pace pretty quickly. So there's plenty of topics to talk about in the future. It's a really exciting time to be in this business.
Yeah, it sure is. It's a lot of fun. Where can people follow you and follow ChargePoint and hear your thoughts and what you're up to?
Yeah, if you want to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn, Rich Mohr at ChargePoint. You can find me on there. If you want to learn more about ChargePoint, you can go to chargepoint.com. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or just go to our website, and we have a great fleet page. We have a great consumer page. And if you have an electric vehicle and you haven't downloaded our app yet, download our ChargePoint app. It's absolutely free to use, and it'll give you access to charging locations all over the country. We're integrated with with the vast majority of the charging providers across the U.S. and Canada, so it gives you an enormous amount of access points. So you got a ton of ways to connect with us, and it really is a great application. So I actually used it this weekend down in South Florida. I was in one of my buddies' Tesla and couldn't find a charging station, and we had to go find a ChargePoint station at a golf course. So we got to go hang out there for a little while and get his car all charged up before we went out. We went out for the afternoon. So
yeah, I think that's called dog fooding, right? Using your own product.
Yes, yes, no doubt.
Which is always advisable.
I was very relieved there was a dot on the map very, very close to where we were staying, because we actually forgot to charge our vehicle when we came home that night. And we meant to.
That's shame on you, man. Working at ChargePoint.
It was a rental house. It was a rental house, so I think we're a little out of our element.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No, that's awesome. But yeah, that was fantastic. Thanks for joining, Rich, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you again. Thanks, Eddie.
Okay. Awesome. Bye. Take care.
Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast, or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints, or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.